Yeah, perfect. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today on Scaling Retail Allocations webinar. Just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Eitan. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Toolio. As you know, we're hosting Amanda Holland from Stio to talk about her experience on scaling their allocation processes as Stio grows. Stio and Amanda have been longtime friends of Toolio, and we couldn't be more excited to have them on the call. I'll be introducing her shortly, but before I do that, a few notes on the structure of the call today. The webinar will be roughly 45 minutes. We'll start off with about 20 to 30 minutes of discussions on allocations and supply chain and Stio as well. And then we'll open up the floor for Q&A and community sharing as well. Also, today we have on the call Tess from our sales team, who used to be a senior allocation analyst at TJX. So she brings a lot of passion and on the topic at hand. So Tess will be collecting questions that you can just be sharing in the chat throughout the conversation. I'll be doing a Q&A with Amanda as well, but also like towards the end, we'll be aggregating all the questions and we'll be sharing them to Amanda. So please, bring the questions that on topics that you might be struggling with or you might be wanting a different perspective on. That would be great. So without a further ado, I'd like to get started with introducing Amanda. So, hey, Amanda, great to have you here. So let's just start off with a bit of background about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Holland. I have over a decade of experience in strategic retail planning. I have a pretty diverse background. I have off-price planning experience from working at TJX, department store planning experience from working at Macy's, and now specific brand experience with working at Stio. At Stio, I'm responsible for planning and allocation for our retail and outlet channels. I've had experience with various planning systems, and I would say that most of that experience is using the system to seed to last year, and then doing a lot of work in Excel. Toolio, especially with allocations, has gotten me out of Excel, out of the time-consuming and mundane tasks, and focused more on strategy and refining my plan, which has made me a lot more confident about the recommendation of my allocations.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, and great to thank you for sharing your backgrounds. And it's quite diverse across multi-brands, off-price, and vertically integrated. And we'll be touching up on that as to how that impacts like how you run allocations as well. But before we do that, let's introduce the crowd to Stio as well. What is Stio? Can you give a high-level overview of the business?
Yeah, so Stio is an outdoor lifestyle brand. We're based out of Jackson, Wyoming. We offer functional and versatile products, mostly apparel, outerwear, and footwear. And we have both D2C and B2B business.
Awesome. I'll say that we have quite a few fans within Toolio of the brand. So you started selling initially direct to consumer. How did that change over time? When did you introduce the new different channels?
Yeah, so we started as a retail business and now we have, or sorry, as an e-com business, and now we have our business broken out into 6 channels. We have e-com, retail, wholesale, outlet, corporate, and closeout. We have grown our retail business. Since I've been here the past 2 years, we've doubled the store count in our brick and mortar. We have 10 stores, 8 being our inline product, and then 2 outlets.
Makes sense. And you mentioned a bit on the B2B side, assuming that is just wholesale.
Yeah, so our wholesale business is also a big driver now. We've put a lot of focus behind that, growing with having more like bigger retailers that you would recognize.
Awesome. Okay. So how does adding new channels been impacting the complexity of how you plan?
I mean, it definitely has made using Excel is what we primarily used in the past.
Think
unique to probably Stio or some retailers might also be doing this, but we use one kitty of inventory. And so that's made it more challenging as far as like managing the inventory. And, with wholesale typically selling first, it has added some slew of, challenges, but, we are managing that. And certainly Toolio has made it easier to see what's happening within our business.
yeah, and we see that quite a bit across our the portfolio of companies. The question around how to manage inventory, whether you segment it by different channel or where you like have a pool. Obviously, having a pool is a lot more efficient, but it can open up room for surprises if you don't have good control over the process. So just so that I understand, at Stio, at this point, it's still everything's coming from the same pool.
Yes, it is.
Got it. Got it. And how are you thinking about the controls controls around that? How are you like thinking about segmenting access to the inventory for the wholesale channel, or how are you thinking about not allowing e-com to sell through all the products that you want to sell to the stores?
Through our TOs. But at this point, we're not we see it as a benefit of keeping the inventory as one
Makes sense.
total.
Okay, awesome. And I think we talked a bit like, so in terms of the trends that you see across retailers, like what kind of trends are you seeing in terms of adoption of their channel strategies, maybe like within Stio, and then also like externally?
Yeah, so one thing that I have seen is retailers utilizing their brick and mortar locations as fulfillment locations. When I was at Macy's, we introduced buy online, pick up in store, and fulfilling e-com orders through our physical locations. And that came with a ton of challenges, but we did see an increase in foot traffic and overall sell-through. So I don't think that's an immediate plan for Stio, but exploring how to integrate channels and utilizing our total pool of inventory is definitely a promising direction for the future.
That makes sense. And do you currently do, if a product is out of stock in a store, do you do like endless aisle? Do you help them place an order online?
The only way that that's currently happening is reaching out to our customer like service reps. They
Yeah.
can't see the inventory online.
Yeah, I understand. That makes sense. Yeah. So from our vantage points, like obviously as online acquisition has become a lot more expensive, we've seen channel, like a lot of retailers expanding their channel footprints. We've seen a lot of retailers looking more into brick and mortar, and also like expanding their wholesale footprints. I think during the pandemic there was an era where like when all the stores when all the stock was sent back to the retailers, the brands, there was a question of, well, is wholesale dead? But we're seeing a lot more of like wholesale and brick and mortar across the different retail brands that we're working with. So that is making the problems around allocation a lot more acute, because every channel adds a lot more complexity. So before we talk a bit about the allocation piece and the supply chain nuances, I'd love to understand a bit about the team structure that you have in place within Stio. And I think your team structure is relatively unique compared to what we've seen out there. So I would love to hear like, yeah, what is the team structure organizationally?
Yeah, so at Stio, merchandise planning reports through finance. We own buying, planning, allocation, and promotional pricing. We don't currently have a merchandising team. Product development owns the creation of the line. And then I would say that planning really owns or plays a large role in validating that the line will achieve the budget, both at the style and color level once it's been presented to us.
I understand. That's so, yeah, from what we've seen, it is quite unique that there is no distinct merchandising team, and planners are like very hands-on on the product, working with the product development really closely. Are you guys thinking of introducing a merchandising role?
We are hiring for a merchant that will, ideally kind of bring that art and science together. And it is something that's different than that I'm used to. I mean, we have a really small team, and we have a lot of responsibilities across the team. Um, but in previous roles, planners and buying was separate departments and separate teams. And then even allocation was a separate team that reported through planning.
Got it. And do you see benefit of like having, well, I mean, there's obviously one side of like having smaller teams doing a lot of different, wearing different hats. Obviously, there's a lot more workload potentially, but just do you see benefits of being able to see the end-to-end life cycle, just like having fewer hops in making decisions?
Sure. I mean, there's less hoops to jump through. But I think it is harder to be an expert on everything. So I think that tends to be the challenge.
Correct. That makes sense. Cool. So let's switch gears a bit and move into our favorite topic of supply chain. So yeah, what are some of the nuances of steel supply chain?
So our stores, I would say, is one of the things of the size, both the size of the selling floor and the size of the back of the house is quite small. And so when I first started with Stio, we were replenishing to a unit count, but it was regardless of demand. So once, if we set it at 2 and we fell below that, we were replacing it. Now with having Toolio, we have a lot more control over our allocations, and we're sending more of what's selling and what's planned to sell and less of the other product. And that's because our allocations are based off of our item plan. The
That's
sec Oh, go ahead.
so sorry. No, go please.
I was going to move on to another nuance. So if you,
No, yeah, maybe like just let's talk. So just so that I understand, and you cut off for just a second there. So historically, so the stores are small. So historically, you were following more of like a min-max strategy, like making sure that you're always hitting like you got like certain numbers that you're trying to hit, regardless of the upcoming demands. Is
it was
that
essentially like looking at setting a presentation profile and just allocating to that.
yeah? And yeah, we just want to like we see a lot of that. A lot of the companies coming in, initially they have a min-max strategy. A couple of challenges with that were like is well, first like what is the max? Like how do you come up with the max? Like, was there a science behind it? And the second piece is that it's very hard to know like you want to allocate to demand versus allocating to a particular like strategy or like guidelines. So if you so that you can respond to seasonality promotions a lot more effectively. So it's great to hear that you're leveraging demands in item plan to be able to like drive allocation decisions. Um, so let's move on to the other topic of like nuances.
Yeah, so I would say another nuance that we have is that we change our colors seasonally, even on core product. Like we may have a color that carries, but typically across the board, our colors are changing, which makes it super important that we are able to get in and get out of it effectively. And what was happening is we were sending back large sendbacks to our warehouse at the end of every season from our stores. And so this past fall was the first season that we used Toolio from start to finish. And by being able to allocate to our item plan and using a phase out date, we were able to reduce our end of season sendbacks. And actually, it was less, bigger improvement than I told you last week. We ended up improving, it was a 30% reduction on the average store, which is huge because you think about the costs of both the store handling the product, the warehouse handling the product, and then paying to have it sent back. A 30% reduction is big. And also, like, I see ways we can utilize Toolio further to make that even a bigger reduction next year by taking out those presentation profiles or those minimums on our fringe sizes when we're on the tail end of the season.
Awesome. Well, that's huge. And like there's also the impact of the opportunity cost of not being able to sell those products potentially online or like in other
Oh,
channels.
definitely. We've talked about that.
Oh, sorry. You were gone for a second. And yeah, I think, yeah. So what were you saying? You talked about the opportunity cost piece.
Yeah, we've talked about that because sometimes at the end of the season, we are, sold out online, but we still have these like small units in the stores. And so if we had sent it back sooner or ended the allocation sooner on those fringe sizes, we could have had a higher sell through.
Awesome. So that's yeah. So and a couple of things that I want to like highlight and like what Amanda mentions. Yeah, there's the what yeah, so the phase out idea is like a time frame after which Toolio doesn't send any further allocations to the stores, so you have more control over like when you stop sending allocations or transfer orders, and up until when you want and when you want to be completely done with the selling through the product. So we separate the time frame through which we project and also the time frame until which we do allocations. And we're also, again, and then you have the ability to control whether you're respecting presentation in the store throughout the product life cycle. So when you come to week 8, let's say for a 13-week product, it's a good idea typically to like say, well, no longer I don't want to be sending to presentation. I just want to be sending to demand. And it's okay that the stores might be looking a bit broken because I'm ending the end of the season. Um, cool. So one of the questions that is coming up from our community is how you handle fashion styles within Toolio as well for allocation.
So we handle both our core and our fashion the same. I have my demand type set at item plan. And so I'm planning each choice at the style color level within Toolio.
Perfect. So a couple more things on that as well. So one of the key pieces about Twilio is the connected nature. So if you have your demand plans in one place, your allocation strategy is going to be following that. And that is key to make sure that like your top-down plans from demand plans are respected within allocation. And then to the question around the fashion products and replenishment, we typically like really see them the core concepts are the same, right? You want to understand demand by store, and you want to make sure that you allocate into that based on specific requirements like presentation, order cycle, and safety stock. With our new assortment planning, the modules are even more integrated so that when you come up with line plans, you can automatically seed in your allocation strategies so that you everything is connected. Whatever preseason ideas that you had carry forward into in-season execution. Of course, if you want, in season everything can change and you can override them. Um, but, um, but the connected nature really streamlines the work. One other question that came up is how do you think about store capacities and making sure that do you handle that through presentation maxes or like how do you handle that?
Yeah, so I haven't been utilizing a max, but it's something that we've discussed as doing going forward. But what we do at the beginning of a season is when we've planned, we use our style count at our subcategory level. So outerwear versus like apparel. And we provide that to our visual manager of like, this is what the style count is this year versus last year. And that's how we determine whether it will fit. Within Toolio, I think we will start utilizing the automated clustering with square footage in place to help kind of make sure that our assortments are similar across square footed stores that have similar square feet. But right now, it's basically just a style count capacity, and then watching our total inventory within allocation plan.
Yeah. Perfect. So one more thing to add on that, yeah, absolutely. So we've got a lot of different ways to handle that. One of them is through presentation maxes. Another thing is that being able to like store level capacity, typically in terms of units, but if you have other measures, you would be able to do that, and being able to create exception reports to give you an idea of like, are you over capacity? There's a lot more work that we're going to be adding in this area, adding such as like adding capacity by different levels within your hierarchy. Obviously, that relies on you having that information as well, but there's a lot more to come in that area. Okay, so and just like on the nuances, a bit on the supply chain. So you mentioned you've got how many warehouses do you have?
We have one warehouse, and then we sort of have a second warehouse in the sense that two of our stores are so tiny that we have like a stopping point to be able to fulfill them or allocate to them more frequently. But one main warehouse.
Got it. And in terms of the assortment that you send to your stores, I mean, yeah, and you like, how do you think about the assortment? Do you send the same assortment or is it localized? Yeah,
The majority of our assortment is the same across stores, but we uh, do some adjustments based on, where the store is located, the activities that happen in that store, whether it's in that store's area, whether it's biking, or, maybe they have more rain. And then we use the number of colors that we send to a store to differentiate based on volume. So I do clustering of stores based on volume to determine that. And we just like utilize the new Toolio automated clustering. And it's essentially doing exactly what I was doing in Excel, except, way faster. Um, and, I was spending hours, separating out our stores by category, by volume. And now it's
Amanda, sorry, we'll have to ask you like for the last piece again. Just cut out like for 10 seconds. You mentioned that you're utilizing Twilio clustering to do a process that you were doing before, and I think that's where we lost you.
Oh, sorry. Maybe I need to turn off my video. I don't know
We could
if
do that.
I.
Yeah, we could do that. We could try that.
Okay. Sorry about that. I seem to have a bad connection. I was saying that, our we tailor our stores based on the number of colors that we send them, and that's done based on the volume in which the store what the volume sells. And so I had been clustering the stores based on volume at different category levels. And now with the automated clustering, it's become so much easier. And, what I was doing was, hours of work can now be done in like 2 minutes. And we have, validated that. And the results are essentially the same as what I had been doing. So it's
That's
really great.
awesome to hear. Okay, cool. So let's talk a bit about how frequently you replenish the stores at this point.
So right now we are allocating two stores twice a week for the majority of our stores. We do have the two Jackson local stores that we allocate to 3 times a week. And that's because there's a stopping point. They're so small in size, and the one doesn't have a back of house at all, that it's our way of being able to control the inventory and keep them replenished. So we do have that stopping point where we keep product nearby.
Perfect. Okay. And so you do twice a week, and some of the stores you're doing 3 times a week. And how long does the process take?
It's amazing now. It was a very time-consuming, mundane task of updating an Excel file that was like so big that it was crashing.
We just lost her at the good part.
Like,
Yeah.
did I freeze again?
Just for 3 seconds. No, you were mentioning Excel crashes and yeah.
Oh, Excel crashes and so do I, apparently.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so the Excel file was crashing, and now, using Toolio, it is like uh super fast. Like I'm really confident in what Toolio is recommending as my output. So I'm not spending a lot of time um, adjusting it as, previous allocation roles were focused on. And I'm not spending all the time creating my CSV to upload into our ERP, which is NetSuite. Toolio literally creates the CSV and I upload it, and it's like, you know, minutes versus hours.
It's awesome. Cool. So that's great to hear. So before I get to the questions from the group, um, let's see. So so are you, as you're scaling the team, as you're scaling the organization, like how do you think about like scaling allocation processes? Are you thinking of like growing the team for now, or like is it just steady for a while? Yeah, how do you think about how having a tool to do automation in terms of the scaling of the team?
So right now, for planning and allocation of the retail and outlet channels, it's just me. We are hiring one additional person, but I think, when we first started, we talked about that role being an allocator. Obviously, someone has to do the allocations, but I think it will be a lot more focused on strategy. And so, we can be able to split up the categories between me and the other person. So I think that the Toolio allocation system has pushed us more towards strategy and less towards having like specific allocators.
Perfect. And one more question is, so we obviously like there's a lot of customers on the call that are already like implementing Twilio, and there's like potential prospects that are interested in evaluating whether they should just like stick to Excel, continue doing it on Excel, versus do in an automated solution like Twilio. How did you make that decision? And like, how do you think about the like what made you invest in a solution? You mentioned some of the challenges with Excel, but like what made you invest in it? And how do you think about the returns and the benefits?
Yeah, so as a company, our business was quickly becoming more complex. It was becoming increasingly difficult to manage everything within Excel. Getting accurate channel roll-ups was super important with our, B2B and D2C businesses growing, and making quick decisions were just not as quick. Our director was able to see that those challenges were ahead of us and began seeking a system that would allow us to sunset those legacy Excel tools. As far as ROI, we haven't quantified Toolio's ROI, but I would say that we see the price justifiable for the optimization that it's providing. We're gaining efficiency and speed in which we can get information, and Excel was falling short for us. So we've been very happy with Toolio.
Awesome. That's great to hear. So I want to talk a bit about one of the questions. So I want to like start opening it up to more questions. So one of the questions is, and I'm not sure if you've necessarily run into an example like this, but the question is when you're replenished, or so when you are allocating for basics to, and one of the stores had like a one large time sale, maybe like a big, almost like a wholesale buy from that store or like a one-off buy. How do you account for them in future allocations and so that you know that you're not buying into that one-time buy or you're not allocating into that one-time buy again?
I would say, I guess it depends on how, the range of time that you're using for your location curves. Because the bigger time frame would help offset that one-time boost. I would say if it was really significant, I haven't encountered this, but if it was really significant, I would think I would just do an override on my location curve on that product, just so that I could, you know, pull down the allocation.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of different options. Override is definitely one of them. Larger time frame so that that loses like significance is another one. Also, we have the ability to attach sales types into transactions and or automate that. And the benefit of that could be you would then have different sales types. You could have full price, markdown, discount, and one-off sales types. And you could choose to ignore certain sales types as you are building your location curves and sales curves. So that way you would know that you're not buying into that. Effectively, it's all about getting your demand plans right, right? I mean, you're not buying into like, so we see a lot of companies when they do replenishment, they just like do one out, one in, or they just basically like follow historical sales. It's all about like getting the demand projections right. And Toolio gives a lot of different ways to do that, a lot of control over how you do that, and ultimately an ability to do an override, which gives you full control. Um, so another question is, what are some best practices that you've learned along the way as you're implementing Twilio as an allocation solution? So you clearly had processes established on Excel, and you did a process through which you were like comparing Excel into Twilio. Like, what would you recommend to another team that is a customer that is like onboarding onto Toolio allocations and like how best to manage that process?
I think at first it's really important to run your old process alongside of implementing Twilio. I think that gives you confidence in that, you know, everything is working how you imagined, and helps you identify areas where you might want to adjust your strategy on a specific product, because you can see, you know, the variances. Um, and then I would say that, you know, the minimum presentation is a good option, especially for won't be allocated because it's a fraction of a sale. And so you that's your way of like ensuring that your total setup is what you want it to look like.
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple of things. So first of all, running the two processes. I hope I'm okay. Running the two processes side by side until like you trust the system. And then you also mentioned that being using presentation profiles so that you have control over some like some things that you cannot give up, right? I mean, you want to make sure that I need at least like 112, 11 or something, or distribution always carried in the stores. All the fringe sizes are carried in the stores. So you want to have like overrides that ensure that. So those are um, two important things. And how do you think about like, and this is like one thing that every team that is getting on, just getting adjusted to. How do you think about like managing the inputs versus the outputs? Like some teams want to like might want to like override the result of allocation, but I think you mentioned a great way of like, hey, it's all about the inputs, controlling the inputs. Like, how do you think about that? Like, if if the system is not giving a recommendation that you wouldn't have expected, like, how do you think about um,
Yeah.
scenario planning, yeah, around that?
Am I coming through? I
You're
think I
coming
froze
through.
again. But I never adjust my output. If the output is not what I want it to be, then I alter my strategy. And so I believe, you know, like I believe that the Tulio's allocation has, I think I mentioned earlier, kind of gotten rid of a little bit of like the allocator specific role and made it more strategy based. And so I think, you know, you just need to, if you don't like the output, you need to adjust the strategy to get the result that you want. So my process on a weekly basis is I have set up reporting in item plan that has conditional formatting to call out where I'm either missing my plan significantly or exceeding my plan. And so I make my adjustments there before I ever before I'd ever consider like adjusting the output within allocations.
Perfect. That makes sense. And just to like make sure like your current weekly process, can you like take us through that again?
Yeah, so I have a item plan view that I've set up that it shows what my plan is for the month, and how much I have in for the month, and it has conditional formatting set up that's like I'm exceeding my plan where I should be at this point in time, and conditional formatting for where I'm missing my plan at where I should be at this point in time. And so those would be the styles that I would choose to make alterations on my plan. Sometimes I won't if I know why that's happening. But otherwise, that's where I make those edits and then rerun my strategy in allocation.
Perfect. Awesome. Cool. As we're nearing the end, just want to make sure that we cover any questions that anyone in the audience might have. So I recommend if you have any questions, please share them and we'll cover that. But one more question that I have is, what are some of your recommendations for retailers as they are either like just getting into allocation or expanding their store footprints? Anything that comes to mind in terms of recommendations?
I would say like just as far as like allocations go, or
Allocations, how to think about like scaling their processes.
yeah, I would say don't be hard on yourself.
Mhm.
You can I think you can always change the strategy. Keep an open mind as far as like look at it more big picture, and look at where you've had, inventory stockouts. I mean, that's an opportunity where you could focus more sales in the future.
Perfect. Um, One more question that is trickling in. Do you currently do pre-packs or like case packs, I'd say, allocating into your stores, or do you allocate eaches?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of your question.
Like, do you currently allocate case packs or like assorted packs, like maybe like a size run, or do you allocate typically eaches?
We'd allocate eaches.
Okay. And have you like is allocating case packs at this point like in your roadmap or just eaches for now?
No, it's not at this point in time.
Got it. Okay. Let me just see if there is any other questions. And one last question that I do have you started like incorporating promotions into like future promotions into your allocation processes so that you know that you're allocating to a particular promotion, or is it coming directly from item plan? How do you handle that?
It's still coming directly from item plan. I do adjust when I first initially enter my item plan, it will be like split evenly by week. But if I know, that there's um, an event or like during the holidays when you really want your inventory to build, I adjust my plan on the weekly basis to reflect that, so that my item plan will also reflect that, or my allocations will also reflect that.
Perfect. Well, thank you. One of the other questions coming in is whether like Toolio handles pre-packs, and I want to like distinguish there's pre-packs and case packs as we think about it. We think about pre-packs as order multiples effectively, which we handle. Handling case packs is something on our roadmap. So when I mean case packs is again a certain distribution of sizes, let's say. That is something on our roadmap, so we'd be happy to chat live on that. We'll be following up afterwards as well. One other question is, let me just quickly review that. Yeah, so one question is about like handling the output of the, how do you think about like supplier availability as you are doing your transfers? I'm not sure like if that's going to be necessarily applicable, but let me just like ask it, like, do you think about, I think the question is more from replenishing from suppliers versus replenishing from your PC. Um, Maybe we can talk a bit about that.
That typically doesn't fall within my role, but I would say that, we've had that experience of where we were shipped less than we were expecting. And I end up just having to adjust my item plan to reflect and look for a product that would potentially make up those sales when, something is sold out. But generally doesn't fall into my
Yeah, that
wheelhouse.
makes sense. And let me also like just tackling that as well. Within Toolio, we think about there's different ways to approach it. So we think about the purchase order creation or warehouse replenishment as the responsibility of the item planning or assortment planning process. That's where you do PO creations, and you can have more controls over when a PO can be produced or received. Within allocation, we typically think about transfers. That doesn't mean you cannot transfer a purchase order. So even if you have an incoming PO, you can generate a TO against that. But we like actually the separation of warehouse replenishment processes from the store replenishment processes. And that's like within the Stio case, I think as well, they're completely separate workflows. Um, okay, so we are getting close to time. I think we've covered through most of the questions. Any question that you would have, Amanda, or like anything that you would have from any question that you would have to the Tulia community that we can get out, or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I would love talking to someone else who's using allocations. As I mentioned, like I'm a team of one currently for the allocations piece. And so if I'd love to know if where you have found efficiency and what reporting do you use and what does the process, like your weekly process look like?
Perfect. And just a thing on that, we are focusing on building out our community, making sure that our user base talks with each other as well. So I'll be talking with our customer success team, and we'll make sure to facilitate introductions there. And just a call out to the audience as well. I mean, if you want introductions to other people that are using different parts of the platform, we'd be happy to facilitate that. We're looking into building a bigger like Slack community as well, just to make sure these are like all, whether it's about Toolio or not, these are common challenges that the planning community at large has, and we're hoping to create that in the months to come. So that's all we wanted to cover today. So first off, I wanted to give a big thank to Amanda for taking time from her busy schedule to make the time to talk to us. Amanda, all the details that you've shared, the real life examples, extremely insightful, and for the attendees and for everyone within our company as well. Great to hear all that feedback. As a reminder, we'll be sharing out the recording with the participants afterwards. And if you have any remaining questions, please feel free to send them over to our team, who will be following up after the webinar. And one last thing to call out is that we are doing our Toolio webinars at almost like a bi-weekly cadence at this point. We'll be doing a next webinar in 2 weeks on our connected assortment planning platform. We kind of alluded to that. So Toolio is a module-based platform, but the key thing is that all the modules are connected with each other. So assortment planning is the one that sits in between merchandise planning, top-down planning, and in-season execution. So, and we've been doing a lot of really exciting work on the assortment planning and next generation of assortment planning, and we'll be talking about that in 2 weeks to come. And it will be led by our VP of product, Peter. So highly encourage everyone to join. But with that, I want to thank Amanda again for her time today. And I want to thank all the attendees. Thank you very much for joining. Hope you found it valuable. And well, we'll be in touch. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.